What's poppin', everybody? Episode 41 of the Slip and Weed podcast coming right at you. Want to get into Canelo Alvarez's 8th round stoppage of Billy Joe Saunders. Break that fight down a little bit and also talk a little bit about this fight between Elwin, Soto and Katsunari, Takayama and the stoppage that wound up happening in the 10th round. So let's get right into it. Canelo Alvarez, man, staying busy. Fought last February, fought in December before that. So, I mean, he's on track right now to fight 4 or 5 times in 1 year. And, yeah, basically, Canelo Alvarez stopped Billy Joe Saunders at the end of the 8th round. He retires in his corner. Looked like a fractured orbital bone. The way that the final punch kind of happened was it looked like Billy Joe threw a punch, Canelo rocked back and threw a right uppercut that caught Billy Joe right on his eye as he was sort of dipping down. I think he was expecting a straight or a hook, and so he thought he was slipping down. Canelo catches him with that uppercut literally with his movement, and the momentum of that punch. I mean, you could see when he came up from that, his eye was puffy and purple, and I had a feeling from the way he started to retreat immediately that the fight was going to be winding down soon. Wasn't surprised at all, really, that the corner stopped it. I thought, to be honest with you, it was probably a good stoppage. I've seen some people kind of breaking his walls about him being a quitter and whatever, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I know that there's guys who have fought with that injury, but one of them is Antonio Margarito, and his eye has always looked like it was an eye of another person. Like, one eye is his eye, and then there's like this foreign eye. Like, it never looked the same. So there's always the possibility, if you fight through that injury, that you're either never the same or you're unable to resume your career. So I think it's tough for anybody to say, to make a judgment on the stoppage and on like his willingness to continue fighting. I'm sure if you asked him and it was solely his decision, he probably would have continued. But it looked like his corner was, once he said he couldn't see, it looked like his corner was basically, waving it off anyway. It was a really impressive fight, man. Canelo was on the front foot right from jump. And I noticed early in the fight, he was already starting to cut the ring off, and he was making Billy Joe miss his jab. You could see that Saunders wasn't used to that kind of pressure, it being that effective, and him being able to, close the distance so easily. Closing the distance, being able to be on top of you like that with very subtle movements. So it's like immediately the combination of the upper body movement, the forward movement, and the counter punching, it keeps guys in a very defensive place where they're just sort of trying to stay away from him. But it looked like in the 4th that he found a little something. I thought Saunders definitely won the 5th. And then the 6th, I remember being a little closer, but by the 7th round, you could tell that was kind of when Canelo took it up that one more gear. And by, in the 8th round, obviously catches him with the uppercut, and the fight is over from there. It felt to me a little bit like the zone was almost like manufacturing a close fight with the commentary. One of them had it like 5 rounds to 3 or 5 rounds to 2 or some shit at one point for Saunders. I'm like, yo, like, what the fuck is that? There's no way that's a 5 rounds to 2 for Saunders fight. I'm watching it, I'm like, it's a competitive fight. There's no doubt about it. It's a competitive fight. Saunders is holding his own. He's not getting his ass kicked in any round except for the 8th round, really. And I just don't know where those cards came from. And even then, they were all trying to say, like, oh, this is a very, very close fight. I didn't see it as a close fight, honestly. I thought that Saunders was competitive in most rounds, but I think at most he won 2 rounds. At most. And I think that's like Canelo's getting to that point kind of like Mayweather where he's so dominant in most rounds now to where if it's like a competitive round, you know, you shade it towards the opponent. And I don't necessarily know if that's fair, but I think that's a little bit what happened in this fight. It's like the Callum Smith fight, the Yildirim fight. He's just dominating every second of the fight, and even sometimes in the Kovalev fight, you know, it was like he's, even if it's close, he's in control of what's happening. And so I think a lot of us have grown so accustomed to his dominance that seeing somebody, you know, trying to win the fight and winning some moments and maybe even winning some rounds, it's like maybe we think we're seeing something we're not. You know what I mean? And aside from that, he's got the defense part of the Mayweather effect now. You know what I mean? Where his upper body movement and his blocking and his parrying and the way he steps out of range real quick and then is right back in range, like his defense has gotten so good, man, that he really makes these guys nervous to let their big shots go, because they're tired. Within a couple of rounds, they're tired of missing. They're tired of throwing an air and glove. You know, they're tired of miscalculating it. You know what I mean? So they stop throwing their best shots. And then from there, once he's got them, you know, frustrated with their own offense, now he's got them on the run a little bit because he's counterpunching everything they're doing. You know, and Saunders is a very, very good boxer. Nice IQ. You know, really good boxing IQ in basically any fight I've ever seen him in. And I mean, he just was playing at a different level than Saunders the whole fight from the opening bell. I felt like it was obvious that he was just on one more level. It's not that Saunders didn't have something to offer in the fight and didn't make it interesting at times, but honestly, man, like, I feel like he's just a head above everybody he's getting in the ring with right now, and he's fighting world champions and mandatories. You know, I'm not saying it's the absolute cream of the crop of boxing that he's fighting, but he's fighting world-class fighters every time out. He's making it look very easy. So it's tough to be critical of that in a sense, because it's like, you know, here's an undefeated champion. Callum Smith was an undefeated champion. He's not shying away from champions in their prime. I think there's still guys I'd rather see him fighting than the guys he's fighting. So I get that when people kind of feel that way too. But he's not, you know, and you can't find killers every single time out, right? So the fights like Yildirim or Rocky Fielding, those fights are always going to be there, you know, because you can't fight. I got this new fucking mic stand. It's still fucking wiggling around. You got, you know, if you fight killers every single time out, you know, you're going to gas out. And you also have to stay busy if you can't seal a big fight. So in the post-fight interview, obviously, I think based on what Canelo said, based on what Eddie Hearn said, based on the line of questioning, it looks like Canelo's goal next is to fight Caleb Plant. And to be able to say that he has all 4 belts at 168 pounds, first unified super middleweight champion, or undisputed super middleweight champion, and would definitely be the first undisputed super middleweight champion from Mexico. You know, Caleb Plant's a really good boxer, right? He's very technical. He's very up on his toes. He knows how to counterpunch real nice. He's got good head movement. You know, he slips punches. I think his movement around the ring is really good, but sometimes for me, it borders on running to where, not running, but it's almost excessive to where he doesn't have to go all the way to the other side of the ring. He could just create a little angle. The movements are too big. You know what I mean? And for me, I always really love watching him fight. I think his game is really clean, you know, and he's a handful for anybody at this weight, you know, anybody. But the thing about Caleb Plant, to me, that I'm always noticing is every fight he's in, he gets caught at some point. Even that last fight against Truex, where, you know, obviously it's obvious that he's a much better fighter than Truex, that frankly he's in a different class. And even in that fight, he gets caught. And I'm not even saying just like, oh, he got hit real quick. Like, he always gets caught with something big and clean at some point. And it's weird for somebody with that level of defensive skills to get caught like that. And I don't know if that's like mental lapses with focus, if it's just, I don't know what that is, but for somebody with his level of defensive ability, or it's a conditioning thing where he's getting tired after the eighth, but he always gets caught with something clean, like real clean. So for me, it's like if he gets caught clean the way he gets caught against Truax, from Canelo, I would imagine that he's going to get stopped, right? I mean, it seems pretty obvious. And I don't think I think for 5 or 6 rounds that Caleb Plant can tactically give him some problems, but I think it's a similar kind of deal with Amir Khan. Obviously, Plant isn't notorious for that kind of chin, but if you're notorious for getting caught, Uskadagi, whoever, getting caught with something clean, Canelo's going to be the guy to find that something, and it's not going to take long. So, and the other side of that too is, and I've been critical of this before as well, I just don't think Caleb Plant has fought very good opposition overall. He's had a handful of good fighters that he's had to beat, but you look at the mandatories he's fought, you look at his last 5, 6 opponents, there's really nothing that interesting on there. There's nobody, first of all, there's nobody that's in the top 10 in the weight class other than Uskadagi. He's just not fighting his contemporaries. So I think for him to go from Caleb Truax and the German guy, to Canelo, he's not going to fight Benavidez. He's not going to fight Charlo. There's no other, I'm talking top level guy that he's going to get in with before he fights Canelo. I think it's just going to be like a level shock to him, to where it's just been so easy for him. Maybe that's why he's been getting caught, is because it's too easy for him. He's not challenged, and so he gets too relaxed. So maybe against Canelo he'll be a little sharper, but I just think if you're a guy that gets caught in most fights at some point, and this is by far the best guy that he's been in with, by far. At least Billy Joe Saunders had a handful of world-class fights prior to this where he's fighting top 10, top 5 guys in the weight class. Plant doesn't really have any of those fights. And I don't think that he's had to answer those questions against other guys, and to have to answer them against Canelo, I think is going to be too much. Which leads me to this. I've said this multiple times on the show, dude, but the fight at 168 that I want to see Canelo in is with David Benavidez. I think that's the most interesting fight. He's big, he's tall. He's so big he can barely be in the weight class anymore. And the offensive activity, the level of combination punching, the fact that he's also a front foot kind of guy. I think he hits really fucking hard. I think he's going to hit harder. His power is going to keep getting better and better. I think just overall his enthusiasm, I think his activity, I don't think that he's going to have that problem of keeping his hands in his pocket. At some point maybe he will, but I think he's going to be more willing to just let his hands go and miss, and when you miss a bunch but you keep throwing, at some point you land something. So I think that he presents a different skill set than Plant. Plant's kind of like a stop and pop, stay on the move kind of guy. Whereas Benavidez is very much come forward and let fast, hard combinations go, as many of them as possible. Not necessarily the biggest puncher, but a hard puncher, and the volume, and the level of the pressure just makes guys fold. You know what I'm saying? They just can't handle it for but so long. He's another one too where, he really hasn't fought that level of competition up either. He would have to me, he's, aside from, not having a belt, he's in the same place as Caleb Plant, in the sense that, he hasn't fought, really any of his contemporaries either. There's no one else in the top 5 that he's fought. He hasn't had to fight Callum Smith. He hasn't had to fight Billy Joe Saunders, right? He hasn't fought any of these guys. So, and neither has Plant, right? So they, to me, in a sense, it's like watching them. They pass the eye test, but they're both on some level unknowns because we just haven't seen them in with their peers. And if the first time they do that is against Canelo, we're talking about the best fucking fighter in the world right now. Like, I don't want to overhype it either, but I think this guy is the best fighter of our generation right now. And I think what he's doing is really special as far as how active he's being and how he's pushing through the bullshit of the sport as far as the business. That the shit with Golden Boy didn't keep him down. The shit with Golovkin didn't keep him down. The shit with the Zone didn't keep... Like, he's a keep a pushing kind of guy, man. I got a lot of respect for him, and I think his skills are only getting better every fight. He's just more and more the whole package every single time out, And I think at this rate, it's like hard for me to imagine anybody in this weight class beating him. Again, I talked about this after his last fight. If he's going to fight at light heavyweight, Beterbiev is the one fight where I'm like 50-50. But if he's not going to fight that guy, dude, I don't think anybody's going to beat this guy. I really don't. Could be wrong, but it seems like this is our Mayweather, our Pacquiao. The new Mayweather, the new Pacquiao. This is the once in a generation fighter right now, without a doubt, to me. And obviously he's worth more money than anybody else other than maybe Pacquiao, but I think at this point he's the pay-per-view star of boxing. The last thing I want to talk about with that card is there was a great fight going on just before the main event. It was at junior flyweight. Elwin Soto stopped Katsunari Takayama in the 10th round. And the stoppage kind of came out of nowhere. Laurence Cole just stepped in and stopped the fight at a moment where it didn't seem that Takayama was in any kind of like immediate danger or peril. You know what I mean? He wasn't up on the ropes. He wasn't taking a combination. It was almost in a lull in the action. You know what I'm saying? And I hate seeing this shit, man. I'm usually one that's like my judgment as far as stopping the fight is I want to stop it earlier than later. You know what I mean? But this one was just so fucking bad. And I felt so bad for this guy, Takayama. He's been around a long time. I saw him fight on YouTube a long time ago. He's been in there with a lot of guys. Went 12 rounds with Chocolatito like 10 years ago. He's a really tough veteran fighter. And I'm pretty sure this was going to be... They said that this was going to be his last fight. And to see that taken from him when he was putting up a fight he wasn't winning. I don't even know if he won any rounds, but he was letting his hands go. And he was putting on a show, and he was the other guy in the fight. There was no doubt about it. He had shown up to win, and he was going to go out on his shield. And I thought that with his performance, he had kind of earned the right to do that. And there wasn't any reason to stop the fight at that moment. I was going to look back and try to figure out what fight it is that makes me feel this way, dude. But every time I see Laurence Cole is the ref, I'm like, yo, get this fucking guy out of here, man. I feel like, again, I'd have to go back. I have to look at, what fights he's reffed. But I just feel like so many times when he's the ref of a fight, there's either a stoppage or a point deduction or a call that takes place that's like fucking ridiculous, And I don't really know how he keeps getting work, but I figured I'd just put him on blast real quick. Like, what the fuck, bro? You keep fucking these fights up, man. Like, these guys only get these one opportunities sometimes. And you fucking steal that from them. You know what I mean? So you see these people that are bad officials, the Laurence Coles, the Adelaide Birds, they keep working. They just keep working. It doesn't matter how many times they fuck up, how many different fights they fuck up. They keep coming back. And you see them scoring and reffing fights all the time. It's very frustrating. I don't know how exactly that happens when there are enough people that are good at the job, that are competent. How people like Laurence Cole and Adelaide Byrd keep working in this sport, man. I don't get it. But anyways, prior to the stoppage, it was a very entertaining fight. Soto was a really strong guy at this weight. He looked much bigger than Takayama. I think this is on some level a development fight. And Takayama was, I think you could see the talent and the strength difference between them, which was very obvious. But I also think you could see the experience difference, that Takayama was able to absorb what he absorbed. And each round, it seemed like he was letting his hands go even more than the round before it. And there was even times where I think he had Soto a little stunned and had his hands in his pocket. Like, shit, this guy's fucking letting his hands go. So, I look forward to seeing Soto in bigger fights. I think he's going to develop more. He needs to work on that defense to offense transition a little bit. But overall, good performance. And I just found the stoppage frustrating. And I think a lot of people did too. Even in the commentary, they were shocked as well. So, hopefully we just see a little less of Laurence Cole after that one. So that's it, guys. That's episode 41 of the Slip and Week podcast. I'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.